Scripture today is John 6, 5 through 13. Jesus, therefore, lifting up his eyes and seeing that a great multitude was coming to him, said to Philip, "Where are we to buy bread that these may eat?" And this he was saying to test him, for he himself knew that he was intending to do. Philip answered to him, 200 denarii worth of bread is not sufficient for them, for every one to receive a little. One of the disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, and him, there is a lad who has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish, but what are we going to have these for so many people? Jesus said to them, have the people sit down. Now there were much grass in the place, so the men sat down in numbers about 5,000. Jesus therefore took the loaves, and having given thanks, he distributed to those who were seated. Likewise, also the fish, as much as they wanted. And also when they were filled, he said to them, his disciples, gather up my leftover fragments, that nothing may be lost. And so they gathered them up and filled 12 baskets, which fragments of the barley loaves, which were left over by those who had eaten.
I think you can all see the title up there. Is it working now, PA? Is it coming through? Okay. Let me ask you a question. What is a pragmatist? Now I can't even say it. Pragmatist. Kind of, in a way.
Persistent.
What?
Persistent, maybe.
Okay. A pragmatist is defined in the dictionary as an individual who has character or conduct that emphasizes practicality. It is a movement that stresses the practical consequences of determining essential criterion for finding meaning and truth and value. Basically, a pragmatist is the type of person who is a facts and figures type of person. They want to see the evidence all the time. They're usually by the book, practical-minded, non-forward thinking type of individual. In other words, a classic bean counter would be a pragmatist. A good job for them would be with the Congressional Budget Office. You know, that's all they do is look at facts and figures of the data that is given to them. Sometimes when carried to the extreme is the difference of a cynic versus a visionary. That's kind of the idea behind it. And today, I'm using that as a definition of Philip and his personality, the type of person that Philip was. Now, Philip is the 5th one of the apostles we're going to be talking about. And on every list of the apostles in the scripture, he's the 1st one or 5th one listed. Which is interesting because now after this, the lists get kind of jumbled a little bit. But he is the leader of the second group of 4 apostles. Remember, I told you that they were divided kind of into 4 distinguished groups by what they did and how important they were. And he is the leader of the second group of apostles. Literally, his name means a lover of horses. Now, what does that have to do with anything here? I don't know. But that is the meaning of the name Philip, a lover of horses. Many people believe he was a Hellenistic Jew that came and understood the Greek culture and its customs very well. And you're going to see some of this in the story of his life. Of course, the name Philip is not a Hebrew name by any means. It is a Greek name. And that may have played well for him throughout his life. Now, unless you want to get him mixed up with a bunch of other Philips in the Bible, You need to realize in the New Testament there are 4 different Philips mentioned. 2 of them, they say maybe the same person. They argue about it. Herod the Great had a son named Philip, or maybe 2 sons named Philip. We don't know. Some of them mix it up. But 2 different mothers are mentioned, so it's probably 2 different Philips there. You had, of course, Philip the Apostle, that we're going to be talking about today. But it's important to notice that sometimes it's different to distinguish Philip the Apostle from the deacon named Philip. Because if you look at the group, I think it's in, Acts 6:5, something like that, you find the listing of the deacons that they set up to oversee the affairs of the church. And one of those people was named Philip. Stephen, of course, is the most famous of them, but the other one was Philip. And that Philip, by the way, is the one who met the eunuch and converted him, baptized him. He becomes very important, and throughout the scriptures, he's often called Philip the Evangelist. And then you have Philip the Apostle. So you have to keep the 2 straight, and they aren't always easy to keep straight. Philip, like Peter and Andrew and James and John, was a fisherman. Isn't it interesting how of all the people in the world, with all the talent that would have been available for Jesus to pick to have people to follow him, that I think it was 7 of his apostles were actually fishermen, which came from not usually an educated group of people or anything else, but there was something about them that drew Jesus to call them into service. He also was from Bethsaida, so he shared his hometown with Peter and Andrew. And his friend Nathaniel, who we're going to talk about next week, or in some places he's called Bartholomew. And you will find that just like John and Peter worked together through most of their ministries, you'll find that Philip and Nathaniel also are often connected in the scriptures as working together. As we get to think about this, let's go back first of all and think about Philip's call. It's hard to do without a monitor sitting here so I can see what's up there. We've already discussed how Andrew and John came in contact with Jesus through John the Baptist. And after Andrew heard John the Baptist pointing to Jesus as the one that was going to be the Messiah, Andrew immediately went out and brought his brother Simon to Jesus, and Jesus promptly renamed Simon Peter, which means the rock. Next, Philip is introduced in the discussion in John 1:43 and 44. It says, the next day he purposed to go forth to Galilee, and he found Philip. And Jesus said unto him, follow me. Now Philip was from Bethsaida, the city of Andrew and Peter. There's an interesting fact here that a lot of people miss. And I had never noticed it before until a couple of scholars I've been studying pointed it out to me, or to anybody that reads their books, is with Peter and Andrew and James and John, they went seeking Jesus. But we're not told that Philip actively went out and seeking Jesus as the Messiah. In fact, this is the first time we hear Jesus say to anybody, follow me. And so, where the others went seeking Jesus, Jesus sought Philip out and called him to follow him. And as we reflect on that for just a couple of minutes, I'm reminded of what's said in John 15:16, where it says, you did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you that you should go and bear fruit. All true Christians are called by God to become Christians and to follow the Lord. Now, what is true is all people don't come to Jesus the same way. And we need to understand that sometimes. There's not one way of somebody being called by the Lord. He calls to people in many ways. And that's because we all come from different experiences in our life, from different genetics, different backgrounds. But none of that matters as long as we've been called in some way or the other. You know, I used to think, boy, I wished I'd lived a wicked life before my baptism so my testimony would be greater as to the great change I made in my life. I was raised in a pastor's home. My dad was very strict. You know, we minded our P's and Q's for the most part. And so, to me, it wasn't a big, what do I want to say? When Jesus called me and I was baptized and came to follow Jesus, it wasn't a big change in my life. It was just another step on my faith journey. And so, different people have different experiences to share with other people because of the way they have been called. Philip's experience with Nathanael are interesting too. Because Jesus called Philip, and Philip immediately, it says, went and told Nathanael. In John 1:45, it says, Philip found Nathanael and said unto him, We have found him of whom Moses in the law and also the prophets wrote, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph. And we're not going to discuss Nathanael right now because that's next week's sermon. Okay? But we are going to point out some things that happened during this interesting debate or exchange between the two. But the question is, it's interesting that Philip and Nathanael had been studying basically the Old Testament, and they were trying to find out what it said about the Messiah. In other words, they were seeking for the Messiah even though they didn't understand who the Messiah was at that point. And we also see in this is Philip, even though he may be a pragmatist, he also has an evangelistic attitude. The first thing he did upon being called by Jesus is he went and said to Nathanael, come and follow me. Come on, come with me. Because I found this guy we've been reading about in the Scriptures. You need to come and meet him. Nathanael had questions. The question was, and we'll discuss that next week, what good can come out of Nazareth? That was the question he asked. And he could have well tried to argue with Nathanael, but he basically said, I'm not able to answer all your questions, but I can introduce you to the one that has the answers. You know, too often we as people are afraid to introduce or to witness to our friends because we don't have all the answers. We're afraid that if we witness to somebody, they'll ask us a question we don't have the answer for. And none of us has all the answers. Unless you do, and if you do, let me know and I'll come and talk to you. I don't have the answers, or a lot of the answers, but we can introduce them to somebody that does have the answers in life, and that's Jesus. He is the one that can answer all the questions. All we can do is share the hope that he gives us and the peace that he brings us and the love that he gives us for other people. One of the burning questions in my mind, and this comes from a childhood experience of not taking the opportunity to share more with one of my friends who has not had a real good life since then. But how good of a friend are you if you don't care enough about your friends to introduce them to what Jesus has done for you? You know, sometimes we think, well, we don't want to mess up our friendship with this Jesus thing. But how good a friend are we if we don't want to introduce them to Jesus, to give them hope of the future? Now, the next time we see Philip is in the feeding of the 5,000. And we've we don't have to go.
You already had it up there.
Well, things are coming up too quick back there. But the sketch on the feeding of the 5,000 show us why he was a pragmatist. We've already looked at this when we studied the story of Andrew, but we didn't touch on the Philip part of this story. And that was the scripture that we read earlier today, so I'm not going to read it again. But what I think is interesting is Jesus is preaching to this great multitude. How many people? Yeah, that's probably a low estimate because it says 5,000 men. Chances are there were a lot of women and a lot of children there too. So a lot of people say it could have been as much as 10 or 20,000 people were gathered there. And it was getting to be supper time. And what is interesting is of all the apostles, I would have thought he went to Judas. Judas held the purse. He was the one that held the purse in the apostles, the common purse. But instead he went to Philip. And he said, "Where are we to buy bread that these may eat?" Now, why did he single Philip out? Well, John tells us it was to test him, to see, and to try to teach him faith, I think. But many have come to the conclusion that Philip was the apostolic administrator, the bean counter. And just as Judas carried the common purse, he's the one that took care of the logistics of traveling. He's the one that made sure they had food there. He was the man that made sure that all those things were taken care of. He was responsible for that. I have a feeling in my own mind that Philip had already been to the mountaintop above where Jesus was preaching, looked around him. It was close to Bethsaida, which he knew very well. That could be another reason Jesus asked him. But as he looked around, he said, "I don't see any Pizza Huts or any McDonald's or any place else that we can go get food for all these people. What are we going to do?" He knew the darkness was coming, and I think he was already worried about that, and that's probably why Jesus talked to him. Philip did have an answer for Jesus. He says, even 200 denarii worth of rye crackers wouldn't be enough for everybody to have one bite. And we don't have 200 denarii, we have 8. A denarii is about what I think they said, was it a weekly salary was? Basically, they said to feed that 200 denarii would have been enough for a common family to eat off for 8 months of the year. He says, we don't have enough to even do that. And so how can we do this? And clearly Jesus was using this opportunity to teach Philip to have more faith. Not to be tied all the time into the practical so that you tie God's hands and don't allow him to work. Now, was it unfair to test Philip in this way? Remember, Philip had seen Jesus turn water into top quality grape juice at the wedding feast. He had seen him heal the dying son of the royal officer without even going to the house. He saw Jesus heal an invalid at the pool of Bethsaida. And Jesus, I think, knew Philip's heart, and he was just trying, stretch it out, Philip. Have a little faith that we can get these things done. And then he showed Philip what he could do. And I think there's an important lesson for us in this. Vision is important for leadership. You have to be able to allow God to give you a vision of what can be. And I'll honestly tell you, in our household, my wife is the visionary. I'm the bean counter. In some ways. But she tends to cast the vision, and she pushes me to have bigger visions and bigger ideas. And I appreciate her so much because of that. Because she pushes me off from being as much like Philip as I probably would be otherwise. But to get a better understanding of this whole dynamic, we need to understand something else. And this is something that Jesus said in John, pushing this. I don't even know. I see up there. So he says it in Luke 14:25. He says, "For which one of you, when he wants to build a tower, does not first sit down and calculate the cost to see if he has enough to complete it?" And that's Jesus' instructions too. And so we have to kind of bring these things together. He tells Philip, quit counting the cost and look at your vision, live the vision. And then he says, on the other hand, but make sure when you start to do some great project, don't you count the cost to make sure you have enough to complete it. So how do we bring these together? I like the statement that I happened to run across in this. It says, the church needs cautious and wise leaders to safeguard against extravagant money spending ideas. However, in contrast, the church also needs men and women of faith to see the greater things being accomplished with God's help. Philip needed to exchange his thoughts of the impossible for the possibility that they have through God. In other words, we need to have an implicit faith in God's ability to provide. But it should also, I think, we need to understand that we should not assume that everything we want is necessarily what God wants. See what I'm saying? Let me illustrate it this way. I've got a lot of visions of things I'd like to do to this building to make it better. I wish we could come up with a new cupola out in front so it doesn't leak and destroy the ceiling inside and the sheeting on the roof. I would like to be able to get our sanctuary finished with the final rows of chairs and a few in the balcony so we have more room to seat people. I would like to redo all the lighting in this sanctuary. Remember, it was changed so they could play basketball in here. And I would like to see a lot of that restored. I would like to, we know we have to replace an air conditioner in the near future, and I'd like to air condition the rest of the building. They'd have to do it in some innovative ways. But I'd like to go out the end of the hallway out there and put an elevator in so it makes us easier when we have soup dinners and things like that we can bring in people in wheelchairs and get them to the basement. I would love to have a paved parking lot. And I'm sure I'm forgetting a lot of things, but that's my vision for the church, so let's go ahead and do it, right? I see another pragmatist looking at us in there, no, we can't do that. And I agree. You know, I doubt if that's the way God wants to spend his money right now. I think he would rather have us invest it in people. And I think we all understand that. I think we need to always count the cost. But if we did a better job spending our money on people, maybe we'd have the money to spend our money on some other things too that we'd like to see changed. But the fact is, we have to make sure the visions that we're dreaming are what God is giving us, and not just something that we're dreaming up on our own that would be cool. I can dream a lot. You know, I can dream of having a big fishing boat and a camper and spending a lot of time camping and fishing. But I know the Lord's never going to provide me with that money because it would get in the way of other things that I do. And so, you know, I just think we have to keep the two in balance. It's coming from the pragmatist in me. But Paul also says in writing to the Philippians, in Philippians 4:19, it says, And my God shall supply all your needs according to his riches in the glory of Jesus Christ. What does that say? He will supply what? Not all of our wants, but all of our needs. They will be provided. That's the key to this. Pragmatism should never hold us back. But sometimes the visions of grandeur we're seeing aren't necessarily God's will. Now, I want us to look at another sketch of Philip's life real quick. And this again is a story that we looked at last week. And that was the Greeks come with their desire to see Jesus. It says, now there were certain Greeks among those who were going up to worship at the feast, and therefore came to Philip, who was from Bethsaida of Galilee, and began to ask, saying, Sir, we wish to see Jesus. Philip came and told Andrew, and Philip went to see Jesus. And Philip came and told Andrew, and Jesus answered them, saying, The hour has come for the Son of Man to be glorified. Truly, truly, I say unto you, unless a grain of wheat falls into the earth and dies, it remains itself alone. But if it dies, it bears much fruit. What did Andrew know that Philip didn't? Probably nothing. He had been with Jesus about the same amount of time, maybe a day's difference. And Philip knew these things, but he wasn't confident to go ahead and go to Jesus on his own. It's quite possible they sought Philip out because of his Greek name, but anyway, he was at a loss. I could see him reaching out and grabbing that apostles' manual that he had put together so carefully so he knew how to handle things. And he runs down through the table of contents, and no, doesn't say anything about Greeks there. So he turns to the back and looks at the index, thinking if this was in English instead of Greek, it would be easier to find. But I guess that's me when I'm trying to do word studies and lexicons. It'd be easier if they just did it in English instead of the Greek. He looks back and he looks at it and he can't find it in the index. And he says, what am I supposed to do? It's not in the planning book. I don't know what to do in this situation. And so as he stumbles along without his manual, he has to go to Andrew and say, what should we do? And Andrew says, what? Go to the one that knows everything. Go to the one that has the answer. Go to Jesus. But again, he stumbles. And that's that pragmatistic attitude. You've got to go by the manual. You've got to do it page by page, word for word. You can't go out on your own and have a vision. Notice, Peter was good at heart. He wanted to do what he could do for these people, but he didn't know how to proceed. And maybe he was also thinking of the missed signals that were in his playbook, that Jesus at times told him not to go to anybody but to the Jews. And yet he saw Jesus ministering to the woman at the well and to other people that were outside the Jewish faith. Now the final glimpse we have of him is basically in the upper room. There in John 14, 1 through 10, it says, Let not your heart be troubled, believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many dwelling places. If it were not so, I would have told you, I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go, I will come again. And Thomas asked him some questions about how do we know the way if we don't know where you're going. But then Philip also comes up with a question. He says, Lord, show us the Father, and it is enough for us. And Jesus said, look at Philip, and he said, have you been with me for 3 years and not understand that I am an exact representation of my Father? That's basically what he tells him. Again, Philip is looking for a sign. He wants to see something that's written out, something that's tangible. And I think it distressed Jesus a great deal. But I wonder if he's sometimes distressed with us in the same way. When he said, and we're always asking other questions and other proofs, and he's just saying, look at what I told you. Look at what I've taught you. Follow me and be what I want you to be. But Jesus didn't just throw up his hands at Philip and said, I give up on you. You can't be one of the 12. Because Jesus understood that strength is perfected in weakness. He didn't pick these people because they were the most knowledgeable people in the world. He didn't pick these people for any reason other than he saw a strength that could be there and a determination and a desire to go forth that would be with all these 12 men once the Holy Spirit was released into their lives. We see Philip there in the upper room later when the Holy Spirit is poured out upon the church, and his life was changed with almost immediately. Now I'll give you the truth or fiction part of these stories. Some of this we get from questionable stories that come from church tradition and church historians who aren't always right on the money. And so I say, you can listen to it, but you don't necessarily need to believe this. I don't know if I do sometimes. But the belief is that following the martyrdom of Stephen, of course, we know the church was persecuted there in Jerusalem, and it pretty much scattered the church throughout, across the globe in many ways. It is believed that Philip traveled from Jerusalem to Scythia, or southern Russia, and preached the gospel there for about 20 years and had a great impact on people's lives there. Later, he went to Hierapolis, to the southwestern Turkey, where he was well equipped to work among the Greek-speaking people of that area. Tradition says he was instrumental in spreading the gospel to multitudes of people, but it was also there that he was stoned to death and killed about 8 months after James had become the first Christian martyr. He was one of the first to be killed after James. One of the most important lessons I think we can learn from Philip is an understanding that Paul shares with us in 1 Corinthians 1, 27 through 29. And it kind of explains his life, Philip's life. It says, "But God has chosen the foolish things of the world to shame the wise. And God has chosen the weak things of the world to shame the things which are strong, and the base things of the world and the despised. God has chosen the things that are not, that he might nullify the things that are, that no man should boast before God."